greenhouses. So we got lots of work to do. So let's make sure that we get it right because folks are watching us and the university administration is watching us. And as this asset grows in value, guess what? They're going to want to see more use from this farm. Otherwise, there will be other uses for it. And so we got to make sure that we take good care of this asset. So the farm is looking good. Let's continue the hard work and let's be safe. Let's be mindful of our fellow workers, treat them with respect, and earn their respect in turn. I like to live by the golden rule. That's always been important to me. So I want to end on a positive note. And I want to thank you again for all that you do and continue to do. And thanks to our HR partners as well. Much appreciated. All right, take it away, Renee. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. D'Souza. We will get started. Let me share my screen. Come on.
Miss Renee, when you share your screen at the bottom, make sure you click on your audio if you have a video for in your presentation.
Mm-hmm. All right, can you see my screen, Ms. Williams?
Yes.
All right, well, let's get started. Again, um, I've already introduced myself, introduced LaToya. Our presentation today will focus on a respectful and inclusive workplace. And we want you to know that in order to achieve that, it has to start with you individually. So we've done our introduction. I want you to know that the purpose of our training today is to just cover some basic information about discrimination. How do you define it? And how do you prevent it? Then we also want to share some basic information about respect, diversity, and inclusion in the workplace. How do you define those terms as well? And then we want to share some resources with you to help you continue learning about these topics and practicing behaviors that promote these values. I want to share with you, let me go back. I want to go over my agenda. I'm so busy going through. We'll share with you some of the responsibilities of our office as equal opportunity and diversity. We'll share with you some important policies that our office is governed by and that we're governed by as a university. And we'll try to share some very important definitions in that policy. And then we'll end with a brief video which has the title of The Respectful Workplace, It Starts With You. So let's get started. I will also be sharing a copy of this PowerPoint with all of you after the presentation. I also want to let you know that during the presentations, it will be myself and then Maria will follow. If you have questions for either of our areas, please feel free to put them in the chat and we will address them at the end of the sessions. All right, the Office of Equal Opportunity has many responsibilities. I'll just highlight some of them. We actually are responsible for conducting investigations of harassment and discrimination complaints to facilitate resolutions. These complaints that we receive are under Title VII, Title VI, and the civil rights complaints for employees and students. And we also collaborate with Title IX, who handles sexual misconduct. So our collaboration will include Title IX, Office of Title IX Compliance in the Compliance Office, if there is an involvement of faculty, staff, and student. We also are the liaison for federal, state, and local agencies. And let me clarify what that means. Prairie View is a federal contractor. We use federal government money. And so we have to maintain compliance with federal, state, and local laws as it relates to civil rights compliance. If we're out of compliance, we could lose those fundings. And you know that I've already mentioned that we are a federal contractor because we use federal government fundings. And I know that Co-op Ag also use federal government funding as it relates to the USDA. We oversee the development and implementation of a proactive affirmative action office. We implement educational and awareness programs as we're doing today. One of our other major tasks is to monitor the hiring practice to make sure that there are no discriminatory practices in those as well. We also prepare reports as required by the university, the federal government, the state and local agencies. What is the goal of our office? We work for the university. We do not work for the EEOC Commission. We are university employees. Our goal is to prevent employment practices that discriminate against applicants who are applying for positions here at the university, employees, and based on these protected categories. When you hear the term protected categories, we are talking specifically about these categories, which is race, color, sex, religion, national origin, age, disability status, genetic information, that means your medical information, veteran status, sexual orientation, or gender identity. That means any employment decisions that we make should not be based on any of these protected categories in any negative way, meaning because I am any of these protected categories that I should be treated unfairly. We're here to ensure compliance with the federal, state, and local agencies, Texas A&M University system, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the Office of Federal Contracts and Compliance, the TWC, which is the Texas Workforce Commission Civil Rights Division, the Department of Education Office of Civil Rights, and then again, the Texas A&M University system. Our office also responds to requests for reasonable accommodations as it falls under ADA, which is for disabilities. Anyone who needs a ADA accommodation based on a disability diagnosis, you would contact our office. So our goal is we're dedicated to ensuring a discrimination-free workplace and learning environment for our students where every employee, student, and applicant knows that he or she is valued as an individual and valued and is treated with respect and dignity without regard to all of those protected classes of race, color, sex, religion, national origin, age, disability, genetic information, veteran status, sexual orientation, and gender identity. I keep repeating them because I want you to know these protected categories. All right. So what are the rules and regulations as it relates to discrimination and the prevention of it? Here at the university, we have policies in place and regulation. So when someone says I'm being discriminated against because of one of those protected categories, we are going to be says I'm policies would be aligned with these policies. So you need to know what the policy is before you file a complaint, because most times a lot of complaints are submitted because someone said something or someone did something, but it's not really out of line as outlined in our policies. It may be inappropriate. It may be a comment that's inappropriate. It may be a behavior that's inappropriate, but it may not be a violation of policy as defined in policy. So how do you find these policies? You want to go to the Prairie View A&M University homepage. You want to scroll down to the bottom of the homepage. It's shaded in the black area, and you will get a copy of this presentation. You'll click on policies, and there where you find policies, they're separated by and compliance policy. We have a system regulation, and then we have a system regulation to protect those who have disabilities. All of that can be found on the home page. You have these live links. When I send you the PowerPoint, you can just click on them and go directly to the link. In addition, the university has what we call University Administrative Procedures, or UAPs. The only UAP that we have governing our office is 080101 Civil Rights Compliance, and this is our major policy. I'm giving you the links because I want you to know in advance that this policy has just been revised in August 2020. It used to be a 12-page policy. It is now a facetious. I really am serious that you need to know what your rights and what the expectations are of you as an employee to make sure that you are not in violation of these policies. So you need to know so that you know how to govern yourself accordingly. So I want to point out some things in the policy just so that you know what it's all about. So in our Texas A&M policy statement, it says in section 1.1, and you can look it up, it says that the system provides equal opportunity for employment to all regardless of those categories. So that means that everybody should be treated fairly and equally, and they should not be treated unfairly because of any of these protected categories. So section 1.2 says no individual on the basis of these protected categories or any other classification protected by federal, state, or local law will be excluded from participation in or denied the benefit of to be subjected to discrimination under any system, program, or activity. So we want to make sure that if we're providing training for any group in our teams, that we are providing it to all, that we're not excluding anyone because of any of these protected categories. Remember, if you have questions, put them in the chat. Okay, the regulation is 080101. It simply says the Texas A&M University system and small system would be PVAMU will provide equal opportunity to all employees, students, applicants for employment, and admission in the public. And so we have an office that is designated to respond to these complaints of discrimination, and that would be our office. We also have another office that manages employee grievances, and Maria will be following me once I finish my presentation. And that office maintains compliance with 3202, which is discipline and dismissal of employees, and 320202, which is discipline and dismissal of non-faculty employees. You need to know these policies. Anytime you work for an organization, you need to know what the SOPs are so you can make sure that you're not in violation of any of the regulations or policy statements. I want to go through just a few. The policy, as I said, has 29 pages filled with definitions of terms, just in case you're not sure, because all of us don't know some of these terms. We've not been familiar with them. So we just want to go, discrimination, number one, is illegal. This is the legal term. It's in our policy, just as this says, a materially adverse action or actions that intentionally or unintentionally excludes one from full participation in, denies the benefits of, or affects the terms and conditions of employment or access to educational or institutional programs because of an individual's protected class. Remember, This has to be included for it to be discrimination. I am being treated differently because of my race. I am being treated differently because of my sex. I am being treated differently in comparison to others because of my age, because of my sexual orientation. You will not see any job applications or job descriptions that say you cannot work at Prairie View because of any of these protected categories. We provide equal employment opportunity to all.
Excuse me, Miss Renee.
Yes, ma'am.
There's a chat that says that your connections are going in and out. Can we get someone to let us know if you are able to hear Miss Renee? Or is it spotty?
We're good now, at least for now. Earlier.
I hear you just fine. That part,
Okay,
it's coming
all
through
right.
loud and clear.
And I think Miss Cambria, are you on the line?
Yes.
Are they able to hear in the auditorium?
Yes, we can hear now.
Oh, okay. So that was when the dean was on. Okay, just want to make sure. Thank you.
All right. So discrimination, if I had to just put it in one sentence, just to give you a generic term, it's unfavorable or unfair treatment of an individual or a group of people based on any of these protected categories. Equal employment opportunity. What is equality? It's when everyone has access to the same rights, opportunities, and resources. The right of all persons to work and to advance on the basis of merit, ability, and potential. That means they should not be excluded for any of those potential, any of those protected categories, but they should be advanced based on merit, ability, and potential. And for many years, this right has been severely restricted by discriminatory employment practices against various minority groups in our society. And that's how the implementation of equal employment opportunity was put into law back in 1964 by President Johnson. Talk about how sometimes people say, so I want you to get a clear understanding of how our policy defines these terms to make sure that when you submit a complaint, that it is in alignment with what the policy states. So it's a situation in which there is unwelcome, harassing conduct based on one of those legally protected classes that is severe, it's persistent, or it's pervasive enough to create a work or educational or campus living environment that a reasonable person would consider objectively offensive. So whether it's in the workplace, in the classroom, or in housing, whether or not it would be based on whether it's severe, persistent, so it has to be these all, severe, persistent, or pervasive enough. And that's how we determine whether or not the environment is hostile. Not because you come in one day and perhaps the boss had a bad day and yelled at you. It has to be severe, pervasive, persistent, or pervasive in order for it to be a hostile environment, ongoing. Sexual harassment is a big term and it is a big complaint of discrimination. And we want to emphasize that term so that you are completely sure what the policy says about sexual harassment here at Prairie View. It's unwelcome conduct on the basis of sex or sexual nature or otherwise by an employee of the member, meaning one of our member institutions, which is Prairie View, who conditions the provision of an aid, a benefit, or service of the member on an individual's participation in that unwelcome sexual conduct. Meaning, you may ask for a sexual favor if you're an employee or if you're a supervisor. This definition fits in place for quid pro quo. If you're a supervisor and you're asking one of your subordinates for sexual favor in return for some kind of benefit, may it be a merit increase, may it be a promotion, that would be quid pro quo. Sexual harassment could be determined by a reasonable person to be so severe and pervasive and objectively offensive that it effectively denies a person equal access to the member's education program or activity. This is ongoing. Every time you come into the office, you may experience some type of harassment that is so severe and pervasive, and the severe and pervasive could be a one-time act. If it is sexual assault, if it is rape, it's a one time, and that's severe and pervasive enough. That would fit into the category of sexual assault or dating violence or domestic violence or stalking based on sex. All of these are policy violations, and they don't need to be repeated in order to be a violation of policy. If you have any questions about that, please put it in the chat so that I can drill down if you need further definition. In other words, we come to work not for sex, we come to work to fulfill our obligations as employees. The two don't go together. So our behavior at the workplace should be different than our behavior outside of the workplace and in our homes. This is not our homes. We don't pay rent to come here. Everything that we experience when we're at work is federal government property, state property. And so we have to act as if we're actually in accordance with not being in our own environment, but in the work environment where we expect professional behavior and appropriate behavior, whether you're interacting with a colleague, whether you're interacting with a student, or whether you're interacting with a student employee. You have to be careful what conversations you hold with them. You have to be careful what interactions you hold with them, because when we talk about sexual harassment, it's not based on your intent of whether you meant to harass, but it's based on the impact that it has on the person that feels harassed. So you have to be careful with your words and be careful with your actions. Sex-based misconduct, all of those other categories of stalking and rape and misconduct and all this falls under sexual-based misconduct. Again, it's unwelcome conduct, persistent or pervasive enough to create a work or educational campus living environment. This sex-based misconduct is explicitly prohibited under this regulation. I'm going to move to the next. This is a new term in that 29-page policy, not 34. And I want to emphasize, many people say, well, you know, we can't even have any fun at work. Now they're trying to tell us what we can talk about and what not talk about. Well, you can talk about what you want to talk about, but if it's a policy violation, in section 4.4.8, it specifically says that when an employee is found to have sexually harassed or engaged in sex-based misconduct as defined by this regulation against another member of the university or the agency, the sanction will be employment gets liable, you will simply be terminated. When we talk about being found, once the complaint is investigated and it is found that the facts are accurate and substantiated, so make sure that you understand that. It's not a matter so now, as of today, you know, as it relates to sex-based misconduct, whether it's harassment, assault or rape or stalking or domestic violence, any of those categories, if it is found to be factual, the sanction will be termination of employment. No ifs, ands, or buts. So make sure you're cognizant of that. How can sexual harassment occur? It can occur between co-workers, co-worker, third parties, our vendors, people we bring on campus to our employees, supervisor to employee, employee to supervisor, employee to student, student to employee, all of these categories. If somebody complains about discrimination or sexual harassment, they are protected from retaliation in our policy. If somebody complains about, if somebody seizes and opposes, if somebody participates in an investigation, they are protected from retaliation in our policy. So all that to say that our policy also even gives you the responsibility, if you are an employee of Prairie View A&M University, Section 2 of 080101 Civil Rights Protection says that the responsibility of all employees, that you are responsible for and are free from discrimination. It says that when alleged or suspected discrimination is experienced by, observed by, or made known to an employee in the course and scope of their employment, the employee is responsible for promptly reporting that information as outlined in 4.1, except as provided in 2.3. That I know that back in the day, students would say um, snitches get stitches. I'm not telling anything. If you are an employee, you are responsible for reporting anything that you observed, experienced, or anything that anyone shared to you shared with you as it relates to discrimination, including in disciplinary action, including dismissal. So we already said that you can be terminated for being accused of and being found guilty of, or being the allegation substantiated for sexual harassment. Now it says that if you knew somebody shared something with you and you didn't share it with the department that should be handling it, you could be dismissed as well. So a member must dismiss an employee if, in accordance with its applicable disciplinary processes, the member determines that the employee knowingly failed to make a required report, or that the employee with the intent to harm or deceive knowingly made a false report. So you have to report, whether you know, if somebody comes to you and says, a student may come to you, a student worker may come to you and say, last night I went to a party on campus, and after the party, I was sexually assaulted by another student. You may know this great football player, and you say, that's just how those guys do. You have an obligation to what the student is telling you is true. Your obligation is to report it to the department that should receive those reports. If someone is telling you that they've been discriminated against, it's not your obligation to figure out whether the facts are true. It's your obligation to send that information forward to the appropriate area that should be responding to those type of complaints. So you cannot keep it to yourself. You cannot investigate it. You just want to send the information forward as you received it, when you received it, promptly. All right. So how do you file a formal complaint if you need to file a formal complaint? Here are the directions. You go to the homepage. Go to the homepage, go down to the bottom. If the complaint information, there is a link for complaints, and there is an online complaint. If you receive information about something that you heard about or something that you've been made known of, you can fill an online complaint anonymously. and we will look into the facts, as much facts as we can determine from what you put in that complaint form. So if you've heard about something, you've made known about something, it's not you individually, but you want to report it, you can go to the online complaint and submit it and put in as much information as you know, and you can still remain anonymous. If you are the person that is the complainant and you want to put in a complaint anonymously for sexual harassment, we are requiring that you um, uh, do submit the name of your complaint. And if you want to remain anonymous, that would be a discussion we would have to have. For Title IX, most of the sexual misconduct usually channels through Title IX, but it could come through EEOD as well. They are also on the homepage at the bottom in the black shaded area. They also have an online complaint form where you can fill out a complaint if you've received information, if you've been made known of information that should be reported, you can go on their online complaint as well. All right, that's our policy. Let's move on. If, like I said, if you have questions, feel free to put it in the, I know it's a lot of information, but it's information that really will help you to make sure that you stay. Let me, the year 2020 had, of those, approximately 45% were males, 55% were females, about 12% were white, and 88% minorities. Minorities include African Americans from all countries, and Hispanics from different countries, Asians, Native Americans, Pacific Islanders, or those who identify or two or more races. So we must realize that today's workplace is more diverse than ever before, and Prairie View is no exception to the rule. All of us individually fall into both protected and unprotected groups, stereotype, and the basis for harassment and hostility. In addition to all those protected classes that I keep emphasizing by law, there are many other defining characteristics are judged unfairly. Let's talk about diversity. When we talk about that big melting pot of those diverse percentages that I shared with you, diversity refers to human qualities that are different from our own and those of groups to which we belong, but are manifested in other individuals and groups. So diversity as a concept focuses on a broader set of qualities than race and gender. Diversity focuses more on just the protected classes. Diversity has dimensions that include, but not limited to, cultures. We have a diversity of languages, diversity of abilities and disabilities, ideas, political views, philosophies, backgrounds, and histories that exist among individuals. And we all work in departments where we have a diverse group of individuals working together. And diversity is all of these, and it's more. We can't even name them all. Basically, diversity includes all the characteristics that make us unique, as well as those that we have in common. And one of the ones we have in common is that we're all human. We're all human beings. And I know that I'm talking to people from the farm and people that do research, but who work with animals, but we work with each other, and we're all human beings and should be treated as such. Diversity is more than recognizing or acknowledging our human differences. Diversity means including, welcoming, and supporting people who make up our teams, our departments, our colleges, overall, our university community. So how do we acknowledge and value differences at all levels? How do we do that? In the context of the workplace, valuing diversity means creating a workplace that respects and includes differences. It should be an individual and collaborative effort. It starts with you individually and then us collectively. We have to recognize the unique contributions that individuals with many types of differences can make. Instead of focusing on what the difference is, let's find out what we have in common. Creating a work environment that maximizes the potential of all employees, regardless of what level they work here at the university. That starts from custodial workers all the way up to the president. We all have something to contribute and we all have potential. And so individual areas that we're maximizing the potential of the individuals that we work with. So what is it? Which co-workers show respect and positive regard for each other at all levels. Showing respect and regard can include identifying what is positive about other abilities, skills, or characteristics, not so much what the differences are. And then, as an individual, we should be responsible for challenging others who make negative or stereotypical comments about coworkers. If you hear somebody saying something negative or something stereotypical, you should be the one to step in to say that it's inappropriate. Showing respect and positive regard for others means not making judgments based on someone's appearance. If you see someone dressed in a certain way, you can't make an assumption that it's based on a religious belief. You can't make an assumption that it's based on some options could be because of our own biases, stereotypical learned over our years. You can't make judgments based on someone's age, thinking that because they're a certain age that they're not techie savvy or any other characteristics. You can't make judgments if you know that someone has a significant other or a partner, and that's not your belief religiously. They're not here. We're not here. We don't have a religious department here on campus, and so we're here to perform our tasks as outlined in our job descriptions. And so those other protected categories that we talked about earlier should not be factored in when we're trying to maintain and promote an inclusive environment. And then find something in common instead of finding what we don't have in common. So are there any benefits for fostering and nurturing an inclusive environment? At least 5 generations that include millennials, exennials, Generation Xers, baby boomers, and the sign of creativity and innovative. I take the time to be inclusive. We talk about when we're inclusive, we can enhance creativity, generating more ideas. We'll all have a greater job satisfaction, and then we will provide better service because we're including everyone's ideas. I know that I have children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren that go back through at least 3 of these generations, and I have learned many things from those that are not in my baby boomer generation. I'm not as techie savvy, but I have a child, adult child, who can use a phone and at the tap of a finger, show me something that I'm not able to find. So we all come from different backgrounds. So we all have something to contribute. We can't assume that even if we look alike, that we are alike, because we all have experiences in life that we can share with others and make a valuable contribution. So we want to make sure that we include those and give people opportunity to be part of the team. There can be barriers. While there are many benefits to a diverse and inclusive environment, the concept of diversity invites difference, and difference can sometimes be a barrier to an effective work environment. So what are some of those barriers? Barriers can be created because we lack information about others. We have biases and stereotypes, and it's not even truthful to say that we don't have our own biases and stereotypes, but what we cannot do is act on them in the workplace. And we have those about particular groups of people. We are afraid of making mistakes in our interactions because of our biases and our stereotypes. So we avoid people who are different from us rather than trying to understand them. Another possible barrier is our own cultural background. We each have our own unique culture that shapes how we view people and situations. And because of this, we sometimes tend to judge others based on what we believe is right or wrong, what is good or bad, what is appropriate or offensive. And then we expect people to be like us. And when they're not, we sometimes respond with negative judgment, which can lead to misunderstanding, miscommunication, and in some cases, discriminatory behavior or unresolved conflict. Our perceptions and biases can also prevent us from listening to others because we've already made up in our mind that what they say really doesn't matter. Stereotypes are another possible barrier. We can all probably think of many negative stereotypes that target different groups of people, and we won't name any this morning. Stereotypes are often used to categorize people who belong to groups that are different from ours. Stereotypes can lead to biases and prejudices against people, which can lead to treating others unfairly or disrespectfully in the workplace. Another possible barrier is ineffective communication, a lack of understanding of cultural differences that can lead to misunderstanding and miscommunication. For example, in some cultures, it's considered rude to look someone directly in the eye during a conversation. In other cultures, not looking someone directly in the eye can be seen as a sign of disrespect or mistrust. In some cultures, women are never placed in positions of authority, especially in authority over a man. While that may be the practice in that culture and country, it is not that way in this country. Cultural misunderstandings can result in confusion, a lack of teamwork, and low morale in the workplace. The last barrier I want to mention is the idea of change, resistance. There are some people who refuse to accept the fact that the world and our workplaces have changed and are changing, and that creating and maintaining a diverse workplace or campus is necessary to achieve success. Resistance to change can happen for many reasons. For some, change can cause anxiety. For others, it may create fear of the unknown. And for some who just want to remain comfortable in knowing that this is the way we've always done it. However, the "is always been this way" attitude can silence new ideas and limit our possibilities. There's a lot to be learned about a respectful and inclusive workplace, much more than this brief training can cover. So how do we correct those barriers to creating a respectful and inclusive workplace? Once we know what barriers might be getting in the way of creating a respectful and inclusive, welcoming and supportive environment, we can take steps to eliminate them. Here are just a few ideas to consider. Make diversity and inclusion efforts. Effectively handle potential conflicts before they blow up into real complaints. Practice effective communication. See differences as positive. Clearly articulate zero tolerance for harassment and discrimination. I heard that from Dr. D'Souza this morning. Recognize and challenge stereotypes. Don't let them go on. If you hear someone saying something inappropriate, then you say something. Choose your words carefully. Remember, you're not at home, you're in the workplace, and this is a professional setting. What you may say in your living room may not be appropriate to say in the office. Pay attention to how respectful you are in your communications with others and the actions on an ongoing basis. Always treat people the way you want to be treated and then treat them the way they want to be treated. Practice more and criticize less. Respect and inclusion starts with you, by you getting to know yourself and others. It's easy to feel like we can't make a difference, but the truth is we have more influence than we might think. Whether we're in charge of a company, a department, a college, a classroom, a team, a project, or just your own home, we're all given the opportunity to shape our environment. That requires us to do some self-reflection on our part. Think about some of these reflection questions. I just have a few. Have you ever avoided sitting next to someone in a public space based on how you perceive their race, their religion, or their ability? Just a few questions for self-reflection. Have you ever justified using specific language that might be offensive to some? Just a few questions to ponder. Have you ever tried, have you ever tried to get to know those who are different than you in the department? Have you ever specified someone's race when it's not necessarily relevant for the conversation? Just a few thoughts. When it comes to promoting an inclusive and respectful workplace, instead of focusing on our differences, why not try to find some commonality? What about striking up a conversation? Conversations has the power to reveal what we have in common, to break down biases and connect us with people based on who we really are at heart instead of what others assume based on our appearance. Here's some questions. You can just strike up a coffee break conversation with a coworker that you've never interacted with before. Just simply ask them, where did you grow up? What's most memorable about it? What's your role model? Who was your role model growing up? What's an accomplishment that you are proud of? For what in life are you grateful? What about the world right now saddens, angers, or frustrates you? Do you usually follow your head or your heart when you make decisions? Where would you like to travel? What are some of your longtime goals? Just common questions to get to know one another. Instead of focusing on the differences, find some commonalities. Those are just suggestions. Now we'll move on. I will end at this point by sharing with you a brief video that kind of sums up what we talked about today. It will not sum up everything. It just kind of went over some of the, it illustrates some of the comments that I made. And so I wanted to share it with you. And the main points of the vignettes is in vignette number 1, it talks about avoiding clear discriminatory or intolerant behavior. It talks about, in the second vignette, respect the unique perspective and knowledge of each person has to offer. It emphasizes act in ways that build people up, not tear them down. And then the last vignette will let go of the belief that your way is always the right way. And these are just vignettes to illustrate how we can promote a respectful and inclusive workplace. And it starts with you. And so at this time, I am going to try and get my video going.
Ms. Renee, when you share your screen, make sure you have the share your desktop audio. Click.
Yes, ma'am.
We all want to work in the best place possible, right? Everyone wants to look forward to going to work every day, to a job where people want to be there and are supportive of one another. What if I told you that you can contribute to building that kind of workplace?
We each have the option, with every action we take, to build a workplace culture that is respectful, civil, and inclusive. Now, this doesn't mean we all have to be friends or that we're one big happy family, but we must at least be willing to learn to get along and be pleasant and courteous.
Getting along doesn't mean that conflict or differences should be swept under the rug. In fact, when we try to gloss over our differences or bury our conflict, our organizations lose the creativity and energy generated by different opinions. Employee differences are healthy if everyone gets a chance to be heard and disagreements are dealt with respectfully. Constructive conflict is okay. Rudeness is not.
Right. And think about some of the best restaurants around these days. Often they include really creative food combinations like Indian Thai fusion or Mexican Caribbean fare. Just like this concept of different traditional flavors coming together to create something new and exciting, the different people we work with can combine to create a dynamic fusion of ideas.
Appreciating the differences in our workplace begins when we make a commitment to treat others with respect. This means avoiding behaviors that could hurt or demean others and paying attention, noticing when our behavior does demean someone else, and being willing to change, even if the offense was unintentional.
In this program, we will show you 4 things you can do to help ensure that your workplace is respectful and inclusive.
Avoid clearly discriminatory or intolerant behavior.
Respect the unique perspective and knowledge each person has to offer.
Act in ways that build people up, not tear them down.
Let go of the belief that your way is always right.
Step 1, be aware of what disrespectful behavior is, especially actions that are discriminatory or intolerant, and avoid it.
He was huge.
Who was huge?
Well, I had this party last night.
Yeah, and Kim rented some movies.
One of them was Nutty Professor with Eddie Murphy, and he had this fat suit. I mean, he must have weighed like, what, 500 pounds?
No way.
No, really, he looked like James.
Can you imagine letting yourself get that big?
I don't think so. You'd always have to buy 2 plane tickets, and your clothes would always look, you know, sort of like sacks with armholes.
I'm sorry, but I just think fat people are...
Ugh.
People find all kinds of reasons to discriminate. Weight, gender, race, language, sexual orientation, religion, disability. The list goes on and on. When discrimination does occur, it undermines the very foundation of our respectful workplace. And besides being rude and narrow-minded, your actions may even be considered harassment. And that's illegal.
Excuse me, sorry to interrupt.
Yes?
Do you have those results yet?
Well, I'm a little busy right now.
Yes, I understand, but I really need those if I'm going to finish my analysis by the end of the week.
I'll let you know when they're done.
All right. Thanks.
I thought you said you got those results back 2 days ago.
I did, but he doesn't know that.
Obviously. But why didn't you tell him?
I will. Thursday.
Thursday? That's not much time.
That's the point. He won't be able to finish his analysis, it won't be complete, and Samuels will have to take him off the team.
That doesn't make sense. Hakeem does a great job.
He does. But having him on our team right now isn't such a smart thing.
Okay.
His name's Hakeem.
Yeah.
He's from the Middle East, right?
Well, actually, I think he's from Columbus, Ohio.
Look, I don't have anything against him personally, but the last thing I want right now is to be saddled with someone who spends their breaks on the floor praying.
Not only did that employee hurt her coworker with her rude and dishonest behavior, but by sabotaging his research, she potentially caused great harm to her organization. It's a no-win scenario, and all because she couldn't put aside the fact that her coworker has different beliefs. It's not a cookie-cutter world. People look and act differently. But when we approach things from a mindset of inclusion, we see that those differences actually make us stronger. Which brings us to our second step.
Respect the unique perspective and knowledge each person has to offer. Different points of view are crucial to today's organizations, but it's human nature to surround ourselves with people who think and act like we do. But this can cause us to dismiss those who are different. It may seem easier to ignore the perspective and knowledge of people who are different, but that's a short-sighted approach to working, and it can ultimately hurt all of us.
Hey, Al, what you dressed up for?
Meeting, and this is not dressed up.
I'm not in that meeting, am I?
No. Is this just a pit stop, or do you have an actual work question?
Oh, I need those resource documents I asked you for. We're ahead of schedule on the conversion. We're ready for them.
Yeah, well, I'm working on them now. They'll be ready by Wednesday.
Wednesday? Man, I knew the system was slow, but that's ridiculous.
It's not the system. I'm trying to be thorough so that you know what links to where and why. It takes time.
You should use that new program Zach wrote. It takes like 10 minutes. It does exactly what you're doing. All you gotta do is drag and drop. Here, it's on the shared drive.
I prefer to do it my way.
You know, you shouldn't waste time on that old stuff. Zach's program is slick.
Look, if your way is so much better, why don't you just do it yourself?
To build a more inclusive workplace, we need to actively seek out people who think differently than we do. Ask for their help developing a new idea or invite them to join your team. We may not always like what they have to say, but we need to practice hearing them out instead of tuning them out. Their input will probably improve the result we're trying to achieve. As we'll see in this follow-up to the last scene, it's important to appreciate and utilize the different sources of knowledge in your organization.
We're writing new programs and getting you the latest tools. It's almost like you don't want to do it.
No, you're wrong. We're doing it. But I got to tell you, new isn't always better. If you guys don't know how all this goes together when we hand it over, it's not going to work on the other end.
You're right. And everything we've gotten so far is sweet. It slips right into the format.
Well, maybe the old guys do know a thing or two, huh?
I know. I just want to help. But when I tried right now, I kind of got my head ripped off.
I know. Look, I'm sorry. I just can't seem to get ahead.
Would it help if I did a cheat sheet on Zach's program and some of the other things? You know, that way you can get into it and see what's helping, what's not.
Yeah, sounds fair. As long as it makes sense, I'm willing to give it a try. Just don't want you guys to get stuck on the other end.
Me either, believe me.
Look, maybe I'll give Zach's program a try this afternoon, and if it's everything you say it is, I might have something for you later today.
That'd be great.
I'll let you know how it works out.
A third key ingredient to creating a respectful workplace is to act in ways that build people up, not tear them down. In other words, try to improve the self-esteem of others.
There are lots of ways we discourage others or put them down. Sometimes it's intentional, like when we feel threatened by someone and feel the need to undermine their credibility. Other times it's unintentional, like when we meant to give someone honest feedback, but we did so insensitively. Discouraging and criticizing others slowly destroys our inclusive workplace because employees who feel picked on are less willing to offer their ideas and input.
What's this?
I was just going to show it to someone. It's an idea to compare our production cycle to other familiar structures.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, let's say we analyze our process as a piece of music. What's the theme? Is it a concerto or is it a fugue? What's wrong?
You're putting me on, right?
No, Art. I just think we need to start looking at our production cycle as a whole rather than the way we used to, as a series of fits and starts.
Sure. Okay. But listen, let's leave the wild stuff to Terry. That's what he's paid for.
So, what am I supposed to do?
Why don't you just, take some notes and help keep everybody on track? Can you imagine what the team would have said if you'd have presented this?
This next scene is a much better example of building someone up and contributing to their self-esteem.
So this is the idea you were talking about.
Oh, it's nothing. I was just playing around.
Looks like you shuffled cycle stages pretty much.
I just started moving boxes around. It gets my ideas flowing for me.
That's what it's all about.
I mean, I don't know if it'll ever lead to anything functional.
Well, don't worry about it. If it sparks something, you go with it.
Hey, Jill. Second shift needs somebody to fill in on Station 12.
Sorry. Back to work.
Oh, this is work too, Jill, believe me. And it could pay off big time. You may just eliminate a process step or two.
Ask Janice if she can fill in.
Okay.
Finally, another way that we can show respect is by letting go of our belief that our way is always right. I know when I'm in a disagreement with someone, I want them to acknowledge that I was right. But one way to show respect for others is to let go of that need to be right. Now, it takes a lot of maturity to do this, but it makes for a much more civil and respectful workplace.
All right, it sounds like a plan. Can you make that meeting?
Yeah, sure. I just have to talk to Bill, and then I'll be there.
All right.
I need to move a couple of things around, but it shouldn't be a problem.
Joe?
Él no es la persona más organizada del mundo.
Yo sé.
Joe.
What? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I can make it.
Great. Fine. Let's go.
Hey, Joe, can we talk?
Sure.
So, what were you and Rosa just laughing at?
Nothing.
Because something just happened here that I don't know if you're aware of.
What are you talking about?
Well, I know you and Rosa are good friends, but in addition to making us feel uncomfortable, it seemed like you just ignored everybody in here who didn't speak Spanish.
First, I wasn't ignoring anybody. Second, there's nothing wrong with being bilingual. And third, I'm just kind of tired of having to be the guy that always has to change. Comprende?
I'm not saying you shouldn't speak Spanish, but we all have to communicate and understand each other here, right?
Oh, I see your point. It's just that, you know, Rosa and I both grew up speaking Spanish, and sometimes it's just easy to kind of lapse back into it. You know what I mean?
I understand that. Maybe something that would help is we could all do a better job of making sure we don't leave anybody out, you know? Maybe if you speak Spanish, how about translating for the rest of us so that we can be included? Okay?
Okay. I can live with that.
Thanks, man.
Feeling the need to always be right is a losing proposition, as we'll see in the beginning of this next story. After all, none of us can be right all of the time. For collaboration to occur, everyone needs to consider the perspective of others, which these employees eventually figure out.
Hello. You've reached the desk of Ellen Briggs. I'm on another call right now, so leave your...
Not again.
I just emailed them to you, Robert.
I was supposed to get them yesterday.
I'm doing the best I can.
Ellen, every month your figures are late, and that makes me late with my budget report. Because you're messing up, it looks like I'm messing up.
I'm not messing up. I worked at home till midnight last night, so don't you suggest I'm not carrying my load.
Well, if you hadn't waited till the last minute, you wouldn't have had to work till midnight.
I am not the problem.
Well, something has to change. I can't work like this.
Well, I can't work like this either. I feel like you were out of line yesterday. You barged into my office and started yelling at me, even though I had just sent you the figures. After working till midnight last night, that was the last thing I needed.
I can see why you're upset. Ellen, if you were to name one or two things that would make it easier to get your numbers done and eliminate some of your stress, what would they be?
Well, if someone could just combine the reports from the different regions, that would save me a lot of time.
I think we could find someone to do that. Maybe Josh.
And also, frankly, it would really help if you could just lighten up a bit.
Okay. I will work on that. Do you think you could perhaps not wait so long to start the report? It seems like you could start earlier and not be so overwhelmed at the end of the month.
I do tend to wait to the last minute. I'll commit to starting a few days earlier.
That's great.
When you free yourself from thinking that your way is the only way, you build an environment where true, inclusive teamwork can occur. To create a workplace where every employee is respected, included, and valued, we should all practice these 4 behaviors. Avoid clearly discriminatory or intolerant behavior.
Respect the unique perspective and knowledge each person has to offer.
Act in ways that build people up, not tear them down.
Let go of the belief that your way is always right. As our workplaces become more and more diverse, we stand to gain more ideas, experiences, and points of view. So speak and act with respect. It starts with you.
All right. Well, thank you. That's going to be the end of my presentation, but I want you to remember that ultimately it's not laws or policies, but individual attitudes and behaviors which can eliminate discrimination, harassment, and hostility from our workplaces and classrooms. So remember, a respectful and inclusive workplace starts with you. Thank you so much. I think at this time, we are going to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll have Maria come and share with us. So just a 5-minute break. It is 9:50. If you will chime back in at 9:55, we will begin promptly at 9:55. And if you have any questions, make sure they're in the chat and we'll address them at the end of the presentation. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Renee. Miss Renee,
Yes, ma'am.
would you make Maria co-host now?
Maria, I'm going to make you the host.
Co-host.
Should I do co-host or host?
Co-host. Co-host.
No, I can't do it. Okay, here you are. Here you are. You are the co-host. I'm going to turn my camera off. 5 minutes.